My fiancée hit me hard. I broke off the engagement, and now she's desperate to get back together. Hello, everyone. I've been trying to sort out my thoughts for a while before talking about this. I don't usually share personal things on the internet, but honestly, I needed to get this out of my system. It's been several weeks since everything happened, and although I'm convinced I made the right decision, it still feels unreal. I was engaged to a woman I thought I would love for the rest of my life, but a single night changed everything. My name is Ethan, I'm 29, and I work in technology. I've always been a quiet person, perhaps too quiet. I avoid drama. I prefer to talk things through and solve them without turning every disagreement into a battle. My ex-fiancée Clara was totally different. She's 27, works in marketing, and is one of those people who thrive on dynamism and attention. She's extroverted, charismatic, with an overwhelming energy. In the early days of our relationship, that intensity was precisely what attracted me. She had a self-confidence that made you think she could conquer the world. Over time, however, that passion I admired so much began to show a more complicated side. She became stubborn, insistent. There were signs I ignored, like that time at a dinner with my colleagues, where in the middle of everyone she made a comment about my clothes, laughing as if it were an innocent joke. Or every time we went out to dinner, if I suggested a place, she would roll her eyes or tell me, "Then you don't care if I enjoy the dinner or not." At first, I thought she was just a person with defined tastes. But little by little, I noticed that everything had to be done her way. If something didn't go as she wanted, she would get frustrated or dismiss it. I let it slide because, well, nobody's perfect. We moved forward for 4 years together and got engaged. The wedding planning was exhausting. Clara wanted a gigantic wedding, like something out of a magazine, with more than 200 guests, a huge ballroom, and hundreds of floral arrangements. I, on the other hand, wanted something simpler, more intimate. We didn't have a fortune, and spending all our savings on a single day seemed crazy to me. Every time I tried to raise my doubts, we ended up arguing. She would tell me that I didn't care about the wedding, or that I didn't want to make an effort. I tried to explain that wasn't it. I just wanted us to be realistic. But she didn't see it that way. Everything had to conform to her exact vision. I especially remember one afternoon with the florist. We spent 2 hours arguing about the color of the centerpieces. As soon as I suggested something simpler, she shouted, "If you're not going to take this seriously, why did you even come?" She said it as if I hadn't left work early to accompany her. It wasn't about building things together. It was about imposing. And then that night happened. We were in the living room surrounded by papers, sticky notes, and a huge planning binder open on the table. Clara had been organizing everything for months, and now she seemed to be emotionally sustained only by that binder. She paced back and forth, talking nonstop about the guest list. She wanted to include relatives I barely remembered, distant cousins, their children, their plus ones. I watched her from the couch, looking for the right moment to intervene. When I found it, I cautiously said, "Clara, do we really need to invite people we barely know? Shouldn't it be more intimate with those closest to us?" She stopped dead in her tracks. She turned towards me with a hard look. "Are you taking this seriously, Ethan? Do you even care about this wedding?" That comment hit me. I felt a knot in my chest. "Of course I care," I replied calmly. "But it's not about how big or expensive it is. It's about us, about starting our life together." She frowned, raising her voice. "Don't you get it? This isn't just about us. It's about celebrating with our people, with those who have been by our side. This day should be unforgettable, and you're treating it like a business transaction. It's not that. I'm just saying we can't invite half the country. That's not what will make the day special." She let out a bitter laugh. "Realistic, you mean cheap, right? You don't care if it's memorable. You just care about the cost." "That's not fair," I said, feeling the tension tighten around my neck. "I'm trying to prevent us from starting our life together in debt. Shouldn't that matter?" She approached furiously. "You always do the same thing," she said. You make me feel ridiculous for wanting something beautiful. Why do I even bother if you don't care? I stood up, feeling like I couldn't hold the pressure anymore. Don't put words in my mouth. I care, but spending a fortune isn't going to make this better. This is about love, not about putting on a show for people we don't even know. Her face turned red, her fists clenched. You're impossible, she whispered angrily. You never listened to me. Never! Her voice cracked, and for an instant I thought we might be able to calm things down, but it wasn't meant to be. Suddenly she moved towards me with determined steps. Clara, wait, just... I didn't finish the sentence. Her hand struck my face with force. The silence that followed was brutal. I felt my cheek burning, but more than the physical pain, it was the disbelief that left me frozen. I stood still, paralyzed. Never in my life had I experienced anything like this. This was the woman I was going to marry, and she had just crossed an unthinkable line. I looked at her, trying to understand what had just happened. Her face changed in seconds, passing from fury to horror. She opened her mouth awkwardly. Ethan, I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to. I couldn't respond. My breathing was ragged, struggling not to break down. And looking back, everything began to make sense. Those small verbal aggressions, the way every disagreement became a battle, and I ended up giving in to keep the peace. This was not an isolated incident. It was the climax of something that had been brewing for a long time. I stood up calmly, more firmly than I would have imagined. I looked her straight in the eyes. Pack your bags. Her eyes widened. She took a step back, wringing her hands. What? Ethan, wait. I didn't mean to. You have to believe me. I wasn't thinking straight. I just reacted. Stop, I interrupted, raising my hand. I don't care what your excuse is. You put your hands on me, Clara, and that is something I will never tolerate. Pick up your things and leave. She started crying, begging me to give her a chance to explain, but I wasn't willing to listen. There's nothing to explain, I said firmly. You crossed a line, and this is where we end. Pack your suitcase and leave. She tried to argue, but I wasn't going to let myself be manipulated by her guilt or her tears. I stood there, arms crossed, watching her pick up her purse and some of her belongings. Her hands were trembling, and she looked at me constantly, as if waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. When she finally left the house, an unsettling silence fell. I dropped onto the couch, looking at the mess she had left, with the wedding binder open and papers scattered on the floor. In that instant, I realized I had just ended a 4-year relationship in barely 15 minutes, and the strangest thing was that I no longer felt angry. The next morning, I woke up to the incessant sound of my phone. Calls, messages, notifications. It seemed like everyone had found out. Clara had surely told some people and, as is often the case, the news spread fast. I decided to start facing the chaos. I called my parents first. My mother answered immediately with a cheerful voice, as if she were expecting an update on the wedding. Ethan, how's everything going? Have you and Clara decided on the cake yet? I took a deep breath. Mom, there won't be a cake. There won't be a wedding. I broke up with Clara. There was a silence so long that for a moment I thought the call had dropped. What? She replied in that tone only a mother can use, a perfect blend of surprise and disappointment. It's a long story, but it's over, I said firmly. Clara no longer lives here, and I've canceled the wedding. She didn't take the news well. Ethan, this is very serious. People are expecting a wedding. Do you realize how embarrassing this will be for everyone? Mom, I interrupted. She crossed a line. There was another silence, but this time her tone changed. Are you okay? Yes, but I'm not going to marry someone who thinks that is acceptable. That seemed to make her understand. She let out a sigh. I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. I'll tell your father. Do you need anything? No, I'm fine. I just need some space. We hung up, and I moved on to the next matter, canceling the wedding. I started with the event venue. The woman who took my call was polite, although she hesitated a bit when I explained that we wouldn't be going ahead. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said. "We'll need to discuss the deposit." "Keep it," I replied. "I don't care." Then came the photographer, the caterer, the DJ. Each call was like ripping off a Band-Aid. By the time I finished, I was mentally exhausted. And then the messages from Clara started coming in. At first, they were apologies, long paragraphs saying how sorry she was, that she hadn't meant to slap me, that the stress had overwhelmed her. Then her tone changed to anger. "Are you really going to throw away 4 years over one mistake?" she wrote. "You're exaggerating." By the end of the day, the messages were a mix of desperation and emotional blackmail. "You're ruining my life," one said. "Everyone is asking me what happened, and I don't know what to say." I didn't respond to any of them. What could I say? She knew perfectly well what she had done. The situation became complicated when mutual friends started writing to me. Some were understanding. My friend Oscar, for example, called to check on me. "I heard," he said. "How are you dealing with all this?" "I'm fine," I replied. "You did the right thing," he affirmed. "No one should put up with something like that." But not everyone thought the same. Clara's friend Martha decided to take her side. She started posting thinly veiled remarks on social media. Comments like, "Some people can't handle a strong, independent woman," or "Imagine being so fragile that you ruin a relationship over nothing." She didn't mention me directly, but it was obvious she was referring to me. Martha's opinion mattered little to me. What did affect me was the reaction of Clara's parents. Her mother called me the next day. Her voice was trembling, and I could sense the guilt. "Ethan, please don't do this," she pleaded. "Clara is very stressed. She didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sorry, but there is no turning back from this. I can't marry someone who thinks it's okay to use violence. It doesn't matter the reason. She's devastated," she told me. "She loves you. Can't you give her another chance?" "No," I replied firmly. "I've made my decision." Her father called me that night. His tone was colder. "I don't know what happened," he said, "but this is going to make both of you look bad. People will talk. Are you prepared for that?" I almost laughed. "With all due respect, sir, I care more about respecting my own boundaries than what people say." He hung up shortly after, clearly annoyed. By the end of that week, I felt like I had been run over. I wasn't sad or heartbroken. I was just exhausted. The hardest part wasn't the breakup, but the constant bombardment of outside opinions. Then the rumors started. I assume it was Martha who began saying I had exaggerated, that Clara was the real victim. Some acquaintances approached me to ask for my side of the story, though it was really their way of saying they didn't believe me. "She was just stressed," someone wrote. "Did you really have to kick her out?" I didn't answer. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, and yet, despite all the noise, I felt lighter. The house was quiet, yes, but it also felt peaceful. There were no arguments, no shouting, no tension floating in the air. Still, something didn't feel right. The way Clara reacted, in the end it didn't feel entirely genuine. She was sad, yes, but her focus was more on my reaction than on what she had done. She seemed more concerned with looking like the victim than with taking responsibility for what she had caused. I started wondering if it had really all been a result of stress, or if there was something more behind that behavior, because it wasn't normal for her to lose control that way, and that doubt kept pursuing me. I met with Diane, a mutual friend who always seemed to be aware of everything that was going on, even before others found out. I wasn't expecting much from the meeting, but what she revealed completely changed my perspective. She called me one afternoon with an unusually hesitant tone. Diane is not someone who usually beats around the bush. She's always been direct, which is why I trusted her. "Hi, Ethan," she said. "Can we talk? I think there's something you should know." From her voice, I instantly knew it wasn't something light. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though a feeling of unease began to settle in my stomach. There was a brief pause. "Not over the phone. Can we meet in person?" I accepted without thinking, but my mind was already racing. After hanging up, I sat in silence, staring at the wall, trying to imagine what could be so important. I had a premonition that what I was about to hear would give meaning to everything I had been feeling lately. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on my things, but it was useless. I couldn't stop thinking about Clara, about her reactions over the last few weeks, about how her friends and even her parents had tried to smooth over everything that had happened. There was something about her attitude that made me uncomfortable. She not only seemed remorseful, but desperate to control how the story was told. And that urgency, that need to manipulate the facts, smelled like guilt. I started reviewing every detail in my head. Clara was never impulsive. She always planned ahead. She thought about every step before taking it. That slap she gave me wasn't a simple emotional outburst. It felt calculated, as if she expected me to react in a certain way. But why? Furthermore, her subsequent behavior didn't help. At first, she filled my phone with sobbing and apologetic messages, but when I didn't respond, she switched to anger and accusations. One of her messages stuck with me. "You're making this much bigger than it is. Just talk to me, and we'll fix it." Fix what? I hadn't done anything wrong. It seemed increasingly clear to me that she was projecting something, as if she had something to hide and needed to keep me in the dark. When I finally met Diane, I was determined to get answers. We met at a downtown cafe, one of those always crowded but cozy places. She was already there, sitting in a corner with a coffee in front of her. When she saw me walk in, she looked up, and her expression was enough to confirm that what she was about to say wasn't trivial. I sat across from her and gestured with my head. "Tell me, Diane." She hesitated for a moment, which was unlike her. "I didn't want to get involved," she began, "but after everything that's happened, I felt like I couldn't keep it to myself." "Keep what?" I asked, crossing my arms. She sighed. "It's about Clara and about Ian." Hearing that name made my jaw clench. Ian, Clara's friend. I had heard about him, always mentioned in passing, as if he were unimportant, but something in the way she mentioned him now gave me a knot in my stomach. I never liked the idea of her having such a close male friend, not out of jealousy, but because I know perfectly well how some men think. And Ian, I always had the feeling he wasn't as harmless as she claimed. "What about him?" I asked, more seriously than I intended. "A friend of mine," she began to tell. "She was at a bar a few weeks ago. She knows you and Clara were engaged because I've mentioned you. Well, she saw Clara and Ian. She told me something was odd." "Odd how?" I asked, although I already suspected where this was going. "They were holding hands and kissing," she said, lowering her voice. "My friend took a photo, but she didn't know what to do with it. She didn't want to cause trouble." I let out a dry laugh and shook my head. "Trouble? All of this is already a problem. Let me see the photo." Diane hesitated for a few seconds, then pulled out her phone, searched through her files, and passed it to me. There it was. A blurry picture, yes, but unmistakable. Ian, his arm around Clara, her hand on his chest. I looked at it with a mix of rage and clarity. "Well, that explains a lot," I murmured, handing her back the phone. "I'm sorry, Ethan," Diane said. "I didn't know if I should tell you, but after everything I couldn't keep quiet." I thanked her. I had no reason to blame her. It wasn't her responsibility. "Thank you for telling me the truth," I replied, my voice calmer than I expected. "Are you okay?" she asked cautiously. "Better than ever. At least now I know what's going on." The truth is, I wasn't entirely surprised. Deep down, I had suspected for a long time that something was wrong. Clara had been distant, irritable, provoking arguments over insignificant things. I attributed it to stress from the wedding. But now everything made sense. It wasn't stress. It was guilt. And that slap hadn't been a simple outburst. It had been a provocation, a way to make me lose control and then paint me as the villain of the story. She didn't want to be the one to end the relationship because then she would be the bad guy, so she preferred to push me, provoke me until I reacted. But I didn't. I didn't give her that satisfaction. I stayed calm asked her to pack her things and leave. And now, with what Diane told me, I knew I had done the right thing. After Diane left, I stayed a little longer at the cafe, with the coffee now cold, thinking about what to do. I wasn't going to confront Clara immediately. I preferred to see how she would act when I didn't play her game. Since the breakup, she had tried to look like the victim, portraying me as the unstable fiancé who couldn't handle the pressure, but now I had the truth on my side, and I wasn't going to let her keep lying. When I got home, I had a plan. I wanted to face her, but on my own terms. So I texted her, "We need to talk. Come home tomorrow at 7 p.m. She replied within minutes, "Finally, I knew you'd realize you overreacted." I didn't reply. Let her think what she wanted. The next day, she would know how wrong she was. Shortly before 7 p.m., I tidied the living room. I removed all the work papers from the table, leaving only one printed photograph in the center. Everything in that space was carefully arranged, calm, controlled, intentional. Clara thrived on chaos, on shouting, on uncontrolled arguments, but that wasn't my territory. That day, I set the rules. At exactly 7 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, wearing the same dress she wore on our 3rd anniversary. She had applied perfect makeup and wore a smile that sought to disarm me. The effort was evident. She walked in without waiting for an invitation, her heels echoing on the floor. "I'm glad you called me," she said. "I knew you'd come to your senses." I didn't reply, just pointed to the sofa. She hesitated for a moment, then approached and sat down. Her smile faded a little when she noticed the photo on the table. "What is this?" she asked, picking it up. I leaned against the wall, my arms crossed, as silence filled the room. The only sound was the slight rustle of the paper as she placed the photograph back on the table. Her hands tensed, her voice lost its firmness. "Where did you get this?" she asked with palpable rigidity. "Does it matter?" I replied without moving. She looked up. Her usual confidence began to crumble. "It's not what it looks like." "Then explain it to me," I told her firmly. She hesitated. I watched her try to construct a sufficiently convincing lie. Finally, she let out a forced, hollow little laugh. "Ethan, this is absurd. Ian is just a friend. Someone must have misinterpreted what they saw." I didn't move an inch. I kept calm and my face impassive. The silence between us grew thick, uncomfortable. She was the one who broke eye contact, looking back at the image. "Ethan," she tried again, in a softer, almost pleading tone. "I know this looks bad, but I swear that—" "Enough," I interrupted curtly. "Don't waste my time. We both know what this is, so stop pretending and tell me the truth for once." Her shoulders slumped slightly. For the first time, I noticed her truly insecure. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Okay. Yes, I was with Ian, but it wasn't serious. I had no intention of it going further." I pushed off the wall and took a step towards her. "It wasn't serious?" I repeated coldly. "Then what was it? A pastime? A way to vent? Explain it to me, because I want to understand how cheating on your fiancé fits into your great life plans." Her lips trembled, but she quickly adopted a defensive tone. "I was overwhelmed, Ethan. The wedding, the preparations, everything was drowning me. Ian was just there when I needed someone to talk to." "Talk?" I said with sarcasm, pointing at the photo on the table. "That's what you call talking?" She diverted her gaze. She couldn't hold mine. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. I didn't reply, taking another step forward. "What happened is that you didn't care enough to avoid it." She abruptly raised her head. Her face was a mixture of anger and guilt. "That's not fair," she raised her voice. "I made a mistake, agreed. But you weren't perfect either. You were so distant, so focused on the numbers and the organization that you didn't even notice how stressed I was." I tilted my head slightly, unfazed by her attempt to blame me. "And that stress justified lying, hiding things, and hitting me?" She blushed. She opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out. She wasn't used to being cornered, to not having a comfortable way out, to not being able to manipulate the narrative. "Now, I understand everything. I continued. That slap wasn't just an outburst. You wanted me to react. You wanted me to explode so you could run away without carrying the responsibility. Am I wrong? The silence betrayed her. She didn't need to say anything else. You wanted me to lose control? I added, leaning slightly towards her. But I didn't, and I won't. That's why you're here trying to piece the story back together in your favor. Ethan, please, she said, her voice broken and her eyes full of tears. I ruined it, I know, but we can still fix it. I'll do whatever it takes. I straightened up and took a step back. Fix what, Clara? Trust? Respect? Do you think those things are repaired just like that? This is not something that can be fixed. This is part of who you are, and I don't want to be a part of it. She stood up abruptly, shouting, So that's it? You're going to throw everything away? 4 years, Ethan, and you're going to abandon everything over a mistake? This wasn't a mistake. They were decisions. You chose to cheat on me. You chose to lie to me. You chose to go further when you didn't get the reaction you were looking for. I'm not throwing anything away. You did it first. Then she cried for real. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she reached out a hand towards me. I stepped away again, shaking my head. No, you don't get to play the victim after everything you did. She froze, her hand suspended in the air. Then she let it drop. The tears continued, but there was no fight left in her gaze. She knew she had lost. Get out, I said in a low voice, pointing to the door. Her lips trembled as she murmured, Ethan! Out, I repeated more firmly. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Just before leaving, she turned one last time. I'm sorry, she said, barely audible. I didn't respond. The door closed behind her, and silence returned to fill the room. After that confrontation, I didn't feel anger, only a strange calm. There were no more doubts or open wounds. What was left of my feelings for Clara had vanished the moment she confirmed everything I already suspected. I didn't need her to give me closure. I had given it to myself. A few weeks passed. Little by little, I started to feel like myself again. The house belonged to me again, not just physically, but emotionally, quieter, more organized, and above all, peaceful. I reconnected with my routine, resumed work, and got back in touch with several friends I had neglected during the relationship. And that's when the first news about Clara's new life began to arrive. I hadn't heard much from her since she left. I wasn't looking for it either. But mutual friends sometimes keep you informed, whether you want it or not. One night, Oscar, a constant source of gossip, called me with that tone he uses when he's about to drop something he can't keep to himself. Bro, he said, laughing, you won't believe what I just found out. Go on, I replied, ready for any absurdity. Clara moved in with Ian. I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. And he threw her out badly. That certainly got my attention. Threw her out? What happened? Apparently he found her cheating on him, too. I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. Not just a laugh, but one of those breathless, full-on laughs. Not out of cruelty, but because sometimes karma doesn't just arrive, it does so with poetic precision. Are you serious? I asked, still smiling. She cheated on Ian? Yeah, Oscar replied, with a guy from the gym. It seems they had been seeing each other secretly for weeks. Ian found out and threw all her stuff into the yard. One of the neighbors recorded the whole thing and put it online. I shook my head, between surprise and a strange sense of satisfaction. Send me that video. Oscar didn't hesitate. Within seconds, I had the link. It was a poor quality recording, but clear enough to show Ian taking out garbage bags full of Clara's belongings and throwing them onto the lawn while she cried and yelled at him. He didn't say much. He just pointed at the car and shouted at her to leave before he called the police. A disaster, but a completely deserved one. The reality was that her self-destructive spiral, the one she always denied, was finally catching up to her. Looks like she wasn't as good at hiding things as she thought, I commented with a smile. You're understating it, Oscar said. The gossip is running wild everywhere. Even her social media clique is distancing themselves. Martha hasn't posted anything defending her since it all happened. Martha, who called herself her best friend, had been one of the most vocal critics of me online when I broke up with Clara. She posted passive-aggressive jabs about fragile men and how much strong women intimidate the insecure. I never paid attention to it because it wasn't worth it. I figured, I said. Martha always has to protect her image. If defending Clara makes her look bad, she simply steps aside. Exactly, Oscar affirmed. Anyway, I thought you'd want to know. Karma does its thing. We ended the call, and I spent the rest of the night watching that video several times. Each time I felt a little less guilty for enjoying it. The following days were, to say the least, interesting. I started receiving messages from several mutual acquaintances. Some apologized for doubting me. Others just sought details of what had happened between Clara and me. I kept my version brief and clear. She crossed a line, and that's why I ended everything. Nothing more to say. I no longer felt the need to justify myself to anyone. Let everyone think what they wanted. The people who mattered knew the truth, and the rest, well, they weren't my business. For now, I just want to leave all this mess behind, though I have a hunch that Clara won't let it go that easily. Hello, everyone. I didn't intend to write an update, but something recently happened that I need to share. Those who read my previous post already know that I cut Clara out of my life. The slap, the infidelity, the manipulation. It was too much. I wasn't going to let her keep walking all over me. Since then, my life has been quiet, even peaceful. But of course, Clara hadn't given up yet. Last week, she showed up at my front door. Yes, just as you read. I hadn't heard from her in months. I thought she would be doing what people like her do when everything falls apart. I was watching a documentary on the sofa. It was around 10 p.m. when I heard a knock. When I opened it, there she was. She looked bad. Disheveled hair, swollen eyes, smeared makeup, as if she had been crying the whole way. She wasn't the confident Clara of always. She was different, almost unrecognizable. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, "please, I need to talk to you." I didn't let her finish. "No," I replied, as I started to close the door. "Wait," she pleaded, grabbing the door frame. "Just listen to me, please. I've been thinking about everything a lot. I know I made mistakes, but I've changed. I need you to know that." I looked at her without releasing the door. "Clara, I don't know what part of it's over you didn't understand. There is nothing you can say that will change it." Her tears intensified. "I know. I hurt you. I ruined everything. But I'm going to therapy. I write in a journal. I'm working on myself. I'm trying to repair what I destroyed." I let out a short, dry laugh that made her flinch. "Losing yourself wasn't an accident. They were decisions. You cheated on me. You lied to me. And you laid a hand on me. None of that was a coincidence, and none of it was my fault, so don't expect me to stand here as if I owe you something." "Can we at least talk for a few minutes?" she begged, her hands clasped as if praying. "No," I said firmly. "We have nothing to talk about. What you thought we had broke the day you decided to betray me." Her face fell apart. For an instant, I thought she would collapse right there. "Ethan," she whispered, "I have no one else." I pulled back, tightening my hand on the door. "That is not my fault, nor my responsibility." I pushed the door to close it, but she stopped it with her hand. "Please," she repeated desperately, "give me a chance. I'll do anything. I'll show you I've changed." I sighed, leaning against the frame. "Clara, you don't understand. This isn't about whether you've changed or not. It's about the fact that I no longer trust you, and that can't be recovered with pretty words or therapy. What you broke can't be fixed." She finally lowered her hand and took a step back. Her shoulders slumped. For a moment, she just looked at the ground. Then she looked up. Her eyes were still red. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking, "for everything." I nodded once. "Good. Now leave." I closed the door, locked it, and walked away without looking back. I watched her from the window stay on the porch for a few more minutes, motionless, until she finally left. And just like that, it ended. No dramatic scenes, no last words, just a clean closure. And to be honest, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. It was like taking off a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. People like Clara don't change overnight. Maybe one day she'll find a way to heal, but that's no longer up to me. I don't plan to open the door just because she now realizes what she lost. Because for me, self-respect is non-negotiable.